Let's see.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom.
Shalom.
Shabbat shalom. So should I just start, or Sherry, did you want to?
Well, for those of you who may not know Rabbi Zoe, we're just so thankful and grateful. Rabbi Zoe Van, am I saying it right? Van Raan or Van Raan? I'm not sure how you
Van
pronounce it.
Raan.
Van
Yeah.
Raan, from Santa Fe, is here with us today. And I will let you just say more about yourself if you'd like, and begin.
Sure, great. So, Bruchim Habaim, welcome everyone. And thank you so much, Sherry, for inviting me. This is one of my absolute loves in the world, is to dive in to our mythological, historical pass through our texts, and I hope it'll be enjoyable for everyone and informative. So I am primarily a hospice chaplain. I also am an officiant of rite of passage ceremonies, accompanying children and adults through their bar and bat mitzvah, weddings, all very alternative kind of ceremonies, also based on the needs of the family or my patients. I work mostly with non-Jews in terms of my hospice work, because being in northern New Mexico, of course, deeply religious people, but not necessarily Jewish, and transplants also tend to be, when they're passing, tend to be shipped back to New York or wherever they're from. I work in the post-death realm of Jewish tradition also. And I teach, obviously. That's my little world for the moment. So for the first approximately half hour, I wanted to touch upon some of the main events of this very juicy Torah portion. That will be approximate, of course. And then I would like to connect what we've discussed and learned to Tu B'Shvat, which is the upcoming holiday. I believe it begins on Tuesday. And that's the New Year for the trees. To preface all of this, I was saying this to Sherry earlier, there's always points of connectivity between our holidays and our texts, especially in the Torah. And I jumped on the idea of finding those points of connection for the upcoming holiday in this Torah portion. And it was a bit of a struggle, because I don't want to stretch, and I like everything to be based on other teachings in Judaism. The connections are there, and they're subtle. And what I'm hoping is that we can all parse it out together. So the connections between the two are new for me, even though the Parsha, we've all heard most of the main events, because it's the story of Pesach, of Passover, relating to the Tu B'Shvat Seder. So if I will pause throughout quite often for questions, comments, and I guess the easiest way would be to raise your virtual hand, and then when I pause, I'll call on people. So thank you. I think that will work well. And before we begin, we'll say the bracha, the blessing for the study of Torah. It doesn't mean the Torah necessarily, but all of our Jewish teachings and learning. So if you would like to say it out loud, feel free. If not, stay muted and start. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav tzivanu la'asot divrei Torah. Amen. Thank you. So Beshalach means in his sending. That's literally. The way that we usually render Beshalach in English is when he sent, and we will see why. But that's our first little tidbit of kind of a foreshadowing. It begins in Shemot, so Exodus 13:17. And it begins with a description of the route, as it were, that the Israelites will travel after leaving Mitzrayim, or the narrow place, literally, otherwise known as Egypt. Instead of journeying to the land, with a capital L, the promised land, in the most direct manner, God leads the people in a circuitous manner. There are many reasons for this. And it has to do with the journey being able to take as long as was needed to reach the point where we could receive the Torah and reach the point where we could go through enough time between generations to embrace a new world. So the word way in Hebrew, the path, the way that we went from Egypt to the promised land, is derech. It means path or way, but in addition to that physical direction, it's often used to describe the sort of underlying force that motivates everything. The way of God is the way of goodness, say, or the way of our survival is why we have this will to live. So we have a description of the derech, and this derech, this way, is going to be indirect. We're going to face a lot of difficulties. We're not just taking the paved road and headed right there. So finding one's way in the world, I was thinking, as we all know, is certainly not a path that feels clear-cut and direct. So we're all already kind of being able to relate to what is happening if we really look at it. So especially after such trauma as being enslaved for 400 years, time, of course, is different in biblical context, but that's the wording. So it's all relative. Moses died at 120. We were enslaved for 400 years. They're relative to each other, but not necessarily what we would think of as 400 years. That's an aside. So we move on a bit to 1319, and this explains that when the Hebrews, and we were called the Hebrews during the time in Egypt, not yet the Israelites or the Jews. So when the Hebrews were leaving, actually, Moses collected Joseph's bones. And he had requested that when we go back home with a capital H there, that his bones would be taken from Israel, from the place that wasn't, it actually helped our fruitfulness. We multiplied there, so to speak, but it was also a place of despair, as we know. And so we took Joseph's bones out of the land with us on this journey that we are about to take, this 40 years in the wilderness. So the Hebrew word for bone is etzem, and that word also means essence. So all these generations later, the essence of Joseph, who for many awe-inspiring reasons was a beloved character in our biblical history, he himself will be taken out of that oppressive society. He was brave and forgiving. And those two qualities, that essence, will accompany the Israelites on their journey. That's just two pasukim there, two sentences. I wanted to ask if anyone has any ideas about why the word bone also means essence. There's no right or wrong. I don't have the answer to it. But there are sort of theories. So I'm wondering what anyone thinks about that. You can take a moment. Michael.
Michael,
Oh.
you're
Oh,
muted.
you're on mute, Michael.
I'm just sitting there talking away. I'm sorry, but when we talk about bones and essence, it reminds me of a passage that says, from earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, that bones, when they decompose, their actual leftover seems like a dust that you can sprinkle, and it works really good in the microscope. So.
Oh, I like that. I hadn't thought about that. It's really nice. Yes. Yep. And so when we're buried in that, after the bones decompose, then our essence is, still there to a degree because we can sprinkle it. So I like that. Thank you. Judy.
Yeah, I think of our bones as, being our foundation, our framework, and our essence is that part of us that is kind of our, at the bottom of everything. It is our foundation. It is our framework that we work from.
Absolutely. That's great. I'm going to soak these in. These are wonderful answers. Thanks. Is it Yashim?
So my take on it is that in the medical sort of world of that time, the bone marrow was considered the place where there was it was considered where the deepest part of one's life and the essence of one's life force. So that is probably one of the reasons why the bones were considered the essence, because people believe that, of even with drinking sucking the bone marrow out of boiled bones, that's considered in medicine, old medicine, a place to, a way to increase one's health and well-being and for recovery. So that's what I'm thinking.
Nice. I like that a lot. Yes. So, and they all build on each other too. So the marrow, the deepest, is representative of the deepest part of our life. Also connecting to being our foundation and our framework. Great. Anybody else? Why would the same word for bone be essence? All right. We will move a bit to Randy, you are your screen
Randy. Yeah, let's not do that.
sharing.
Randy, do you know how to turn that off?
And then I need to see.
There we
everyone.
go.
Oh, there.
There we
Okay.
go.
Great.
Let's just not do that.
And it's funny because I was just about to say that I didn't prepare any screen sharing. And then it went on. So that was kind of funny. So in 1321, the Hebrews had left Egypt, but not yet escaped from the Pharaoh. And God goes before the people, the travelers, providing a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. So the protection from excess heat and cold acted as a comfort and reminder of God's presence. So our lives were predictable. We were in Egypt. It was a horrible repressive existence, but at least we knew what was coming. Here we quickly escape, suddenly thrown into following Moses's direction. And the people are comforted by God's presence. The pillars remain with the Israelites throughout the entire trip, throughout the whole Torah. We have the pillar of fire by night to keep us warm and to keep it light in case we want to keep traveling. The cloud by day so that we're kept cool and protected from the elements. I'm just doing a tidbit from several aspects of the Parsha, and then we'll go back a bit. So in 14:8, God, quote, strengthens Pharaoh's heart. And that is after the plagues and the Pharaoh refusing to let the Hebrews go, and then finally allowing us to leave. The people are frightened, and instead of God at that point showing us, as God will throughout the rest of the Parsha, that God will be with us and everything will be okay, God changes Pharaoh's mind by hardening his heart, and the Pharaoh doesn't let the Israelites go free, doesn't let the Hebrews at that point go free. So Pharaoh's army chases us, as we know, to the edge of the Red Sea there, the Sea of Reeds. And here, the word for strength is chazek. It is often translated in English in sort of our way of speaking to each other as hardening of the heart. We have a hardened heart. I'm wondering why two things. God is the one that hardens Pharaoh's heart, and not that Pharaoh changed his mind in letting the Hebrews go, but that God actually made the Pharaoh change his mind. There's a lot of discussion about how this led to God actually saving the people. But what I wanted to ask everyone here is why strengthening of the heart would change Pharaoh's mind and go against the Hebrews again, and not hardening, as we would often say in English, if that question makes sense. So let me reword it. I'm wondering why strengthening and hardening are equated. I really feel that when we are acting from our heart, it actually takes more strength to stay open. But in this instance, it's the hardening that makes Pharaoh have a change of heart. So thank you. Mary Ann.
Yeah, when I think of a strengthened heart, like if I'm unsure about something and debating it, I feel kind of vulnerable.
Mm.
And when I make a decision, then I feel strong in my decision and I can go forward with it. But the hardening, I see the hardening more as a stubbornness.
Mm.
The hardening is coming from a more destructive, negative spot, I see.
Ah, yes, absolutely. I like that. So it's interesting that you said stubborn, because that word is actually used in this parsha and commentaries on the parsha in the Talmud especially to refer to Pharaoh and his actions as coming from a place of stubbornness. So that goes right along with it. Richard.
Yeah, my comment was, and I've been troubled by that terminology, making God the agent, in that phrase. But I've thought about it a little bit more, and I think the situation was God wanted to make sure that Pharaoh was 100% determined to do whatever it was he was going to do. And where Pharaoh was waffling, well, should I let them go? They're going to go for a few days. They're going for sacrifices. They said they'll come back. You know, he wanted Pharaoh either for sure he was going to let them go. And if he wasn't really sure, and if he was somewhat prevaricating over letting them out, he was going to make sure that he stood by that and suffered the consequences.
Excellent. Excellent. That's a great angle to take. And so in a way, God wanted a surety, and God wanted to almost create something to happen from a place of the Pharaoh being sure of what he was doing.
Yeah.
Great. And Chuck.
Well, I have a problem with a lot of this. What
Okay.
do we do about the concept of free will? What do we do about the fact that God has already punished the Egyptians terribly with 10 plagues, and now he's going to further not only take additional lives, the horsemen, the chariots, the horses themselves. This is not a very nice God. And I have a lot of trouble with the lengths that God goes to in order to bring this event about. It's a very deep problem for me.
Yes. I hear that problem for sure. The first, without getting too far into this, the first problem I see is a personification of God, but that's just because of the limitations of language. So we speak about God doing this, which, if God's in control, means we don't have free will. That's definitely a conflict. I personally, both through my studies and from just a deep belief that resonates with me, I believe that almost 50-50, maybe 50-50, we have free will. And there's also an aspect that we have fate, that we have something higher than us, something more powerful than us, determining the results, but maybe not the actions or the way we get there. So the discussion of free will is at versus God or fate is very interesting one. And I have an issue with the first two books of the Torah, with Bereshit and Shemot, Genesis and Exodus, because there is this conflict between are we being punished because of what we did wrong? Or is this God, who we don't even know at that point, creating it for our, what word would I use? Our development, our spiritual and emotional and intellectual development. Do we have to go through these horrible experiences? Another angle is that the Torah is an exaggeration of history. There are events that took place in order to teach from our history, in order to teach from those events. There's this wrathful figure. We're gonna talk a bit about Amalek, who's our perpetual enemy. But we will see in a little bit that God is actually becomes the comforter in this. But maybe this event didn't happen with the Egyptians already having been punished and then going through with the chariots and everyone else. But this was a way to exaggerate the story so that we could hear the message that was almost being drilled into us, so to speak. And but it's certainly not pleasant. I grapple with the Torah, even reading it every day, grapple with it. But it takes my faith to just be able to not justify, but see beyond it, I guess, perhaps. Richard.
Yeah, I think that, sure, I'm on. Yeah, I think the point I was trying to make, and this is directed towards Chuck and his comment, was that Pharaoh had free will.
Yes.
But his free will was not on something that was as important as this had to be 100% in. And he wasn't 100% in. And therefore the hardening of the heart was allowed to occur. If Pharaoh was fully determined that he was going to let him go, he said, I've had enough, 10 plagues, this has been too much for me, and really I'm going to let them go, he would have let them go. But he wasn't. And the proof that he even then he wasn't was that then he sent his armies out to chase after them towards the Sea of Reeds. So I think free will exists, but in this case, God wanted the free will to really exert itself in the direction of truly liberating the Hebrews. And if it wasn't going to be truly that way, God was not going to allow Pharaoh to kind of sit on the fence.
Beautiful. Yes, that was very concise. Got to soak all this in. Oh, I see a little head nod, Chuck.
Either man has free will to act or not as man does, or he doesn't. I don't think you can split the chicken. And this is a problem. And it also relates to events that occurred in history, throughout history, especially towards the Jewish people. If God is going to intervene, then for goodness sake, why didn't God intervene in many other circumstances where hundreds of thousands or millions of Jews have suffered? So either man has free will or he doesn't. Okay. And based on history, I have to believe that man has free will. And there's a lot of points for this story for us as a people. There are lessons that we can learn, but I don't think that God intervened with Pharaoh. Man does what man's going to do, for good or for ill. That's just the way I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's right. Thank you. Yes. I'm going to bring us back in just because I wanted to maybe in about 10 minutes, just get through the other hallmarks in this parsha. I would love to have a discussion about this. I'm going to bookmark it and see if we can try to organize some discussion about this, because it's great. I'll talk to Rabbi Jack about part of this topic too. He is leading your Passover Seder. So that might be fun. I can pass this on to him. Okay, so we have these horrible events that we touched upon here. In 1413, not the year, the chapter and verse, is God's assurance that God will be with the people through the good and bad. Then, just a few Pesukim later, the sea splits and the Hebrews escape via the ocean floor with walls of water on the right and on the left, is what it says. So as soon as they escape, the Shirat Hayam, the Song of the Sea, is sung. And this acknowledges God's role in freeing us. Now we are the Israelites, and expresses awe and gratitude. Immediately thereafter, Miriam, the prophetess, who was the one who foresaw Moses' role in the escape, leads the Israelites in song and dance. So we have a long song of the sea, Shirat Hayam, as soon as we cross. All gratitude. God did this, God did that. We're grateful. And then we have a smaller kind of, maybe about 4 sentences of Miriam's song. What is said is that the music is what kept her song kind of going, that she played the timbrel. We've probably heard that song, Miriam playing the timbrel. It's said by one of the Talmudic rabbis that the Hebrews were afraid of entering the sea, and at the last minute they hesitated. Simply by singing a calm tune, it was Miriam who relieved them of just enough fear so that the travelers would take the first step into this unknown. This is a strong message about music. Whole other topic too, this parsha is so juicy. So we then traveled a bit more, and we're hungry, and there wasn't any food in front of us. So the story of manna occurs, manna being the sustenance from heaven that will come down if only we have faith in God. If only we have faith that we will be sustained, this manna will come down and sustain us. The people were complaining and talking about how why did we come out here, questioning why we left Egypt when it was at least predictable. And that's comforting in itself, at least predictable. Not a way of thinking we would aspire to necessarily. But the story is also a test. Can we have faith after all this has happened in the next step, which is in the unknown? So the manna, the sustenance, is another lesson we learn from in trusting where we're going. 1623 begins the instructions for Shabbat. So we have our manna, we go and gather it every day and have sustenance. On Shabbat, we are not supposed to gather this manna. We are supposed to have rest, Shabbat meaning rest. And we're given this 25-hour period of sitting back, becoming refreshed, becoming renewed. 6 days of work, 7th day is a holy time to retreat and refresh. That closes chapter 16. In the beginning of chapter 17, we, the people, complain yet again, not trusting this grand plan that is supposedly happening. And this time it wasn't for a lack of food, but a lack of water. So God shows the travelers, and here we keep going back to this theme I see of free will and personal responsibility and God being in charge of everything. God here shows the travelers that God is in charge in a way that's caring for them, however. So we have this destructive aspect of God that does shift once we're on this journey. God instructs Moses to use supernatural forces in order for water to appear, and water does appear. So another example of why we could at that point or should aspire to go along with what was happening, go along with this unknown place. And the Parsha closes with the description of the first of many battles with Amalek. Amalek is a nation or a figure who represents our perpetual and ultimate enemy. There's not a lot discussed about who Amalek is in the actual Parsha, in the Torah itself. But there is speculation about why we have to confront enemies during this whole journey toward the promised land. Though the people will have struggles with Amalek, the verses offer the Israelites examples and assurances that God will actually and ultimately be their protector. So the numerical value of the Hebrew letters that spell Amalek is 240, as an aside. And this is the same value as the Hebrew word for doubt, which is safek. Doubt is one way that Amalek is understood through a more sort of spiritual or emotional lens. I wanted to ask you all how doubt and the enemy, our perpetual enemy Amalek, is connected. Fear and doubt. So one thing I thought of was fear of, for example, fear of the enemy can bring about doubt. When we feel assured, we may not have fear of what's happening because what's happening is part of the next step. But if we have doubt about it, that brings about fear, or the fear causes the doubt. So we have a parallel relationship there. So this doubt contributes to lessening our confidence and our abilities. Doubt is a lack of faith. Again, another aspect of lack of faith in this Parsha, but more of a faith in the order of the universe, in the way things go, in the rightness of things, in the wrongness of events. Any other ideas about doubt? And yes.
I think that if you're in a place of fear, I guess it's kind of hand in hand with doubt, but if you're in a place of fear, then you're not open, you're not in alignment with greater source, God, love. So
Yes, absolutely.
truth, all those good things.
Yes. And I think that's exactly what was happening in the first 3 quarters of this parsha, with us doubting and then being assured and doubting and being assured. Thanks. Let's see more about Amalek. Some people, of course, talk about Amalek as this historical figure. What might Amalek represent in terms of being our enemy? What kind of Amaleks are around now, inside or outside? Inside ourselves? What do we confront? Yes, Chuck.
For me, Amalek is just a type of person who preys on the weak or those that they can take advantage of. For example, as the Jews were supposedly traveling to the rear, Amalek attacked the stragglers, etc. And so I just consider Amalek as a stand-in for those individuals who, because of their free will, decide that for them it's better to take advantage of somebody else and get things the easy way, or things that aren't, that aren't theirs. In other words, to harm others rather than to be productive people in society. It's just a class of people, and it's not related to any particular religion or country or anything. It's just part of human nature. Some people are just nasty.
Yeah, part of human nature. Absolutely. Yeah. So when we were about to cross the sea, that part of human nature, that Amalek, was trying to take over. Really trying to take over there. By the way, we persevered through all the lands that Amalek, where we encountered Amalek, we persevered. So I am going to read a little poem by Rabbi Yael Levi, and then we'll go a bit into Tu B'Shvat. This is the journey we inherit. We leave the Mitzrayim, the narrow places, again and again. We travel through raging seas and momentous fears and arrive at new moments. Possibilities emerge and joy rises. And then challenges reappear, and so does the terror. Stop, pause, reach for each other, the mystery calls. Stop, pause, and reach for me. Your strength and my song will open the way into the expanse. And that's Exodus 15:2. All right, we're going to switch gears a bit. Tu B'Shvat is the new year of the trees. There's a lot of thematic connectivity between Tu B'Shvat and our Parsha here. As I explained in the beginning, not such overt connections, but fun, more analytical connections. So the origin of this holiday appears in the Mishnah in Tractate Rosh Hashanah as one of the 4 New Years in the Jewish calendar. We have the New Year, we won't get into the others, but we have the New Year for kings and festivals, the New Year for the tithe of cattle, the New Year for years, which is the calculation of the calendar, and that includes sabbatical years of rest, resting the land, planting, and for the tithe also of vegetables. So Tu B'Shvat is honoring the trees and all they represent for us and all they do for us and all they did for everyone throughout history. Again, maybe not the tree itself, but a representative, such as Amalek is a representative one. Maybe this is representative of other aspects of humanity or people. The tree, so just as in verse 13, chapter 13, verse 17, a seed does not grow on a direct path. The beginning of the Parsha, we were going on a circuitous route. The seed does not grow in that way in becoming a plant. It has to make its way through the dirt. It has to make its way through whatever is could impede. And we also know that that happens for us in our unfolding and in the unfolding during this time period. So the seed must maneuver through all that is under in order to come out. Like us, there are there's of course scientific bases for valuing trees. The rabbis who came up with, took from the Torah what would become this holiday. I just lost my train of thought and I apologize. I veered off again. I'm very sorry about that. Okay, I'll move on to the next part here. So God appeared as a pillar of clouds, as we saw before, by day, and a pillar of fire by night. Another connection with honoring of the trees. This is actually how we care for trees. We provide shade, we provide warmth, we provide that light. The earth provides that light, not we necessarily, but we can plant them. So there is a parallel there between why this tree is seen as this huge aspect of our lives. I have a quote from a book here. No, I'm not going to read that quote. We talked about that enough. So the manna, trees are sustenance, manna is sustenance, and trusting that the manna will provide for us all day, all of our meals. We have to put that same trust in trees. We rely on trees. We rely for so many reasons, as we know, we rely on trees. So there's an aspect of caring for trees in the same way as God cared for us, in the same way as we should care for ourselves. We also talked about how we receive the instructions for Shabbat. Shabbat is also, actually, it was Shabbat, and then from Shabbat, sabbatical years came. The 7th year, we have to leave our land to rest, let it refresh itself, let it renew. Don't overwork the land, don't overwork ourselves. There's an incredible respect for the land and for trees and plants in Judaism. Other parts of caring for trees is that we are not supposed to eat the fruit for 4 years after it starts to bear fruit. And that is to let the tree mature and to let the tree sort of come into its own. And the first fruits that we harvest actually are given to the temple, and not necessarily for the priest to just eat, but as an offering toward all that is holy. And that sustenance is not just physical, but transcendent and holy. So the Tu B'Shvat Seder, I'll just spend a couple minutes and then ask questions. The mystics in Sfat, in this village in Israel, 16th century, created the Tu B'Shvat Seder. It is somewhat like the Passover Seder, in that there is a set order and meaning to the details in the festive meal. Seder, Seder, meaning order. One main difference is that the Tu B'Shvat Seder consists of spiritual representations via the natural world, whereas the Pesach Seder reenacts historical events or events in this story that we discussed. The Tu B'Shvat Seder celebrates the Etz Chaim, or tree of life. Nowadays, especially, there are many words and ways to explain the Etz Chaim, the tree of life's significance and the implications. But fundamentally, it's an abstract tree. So the celebration is an abstract tree which contains the qualities of God, or the Sfirot, a whole other topic, another fun topic. And the qualities of God, the qualities of human nature, are actually understood through our relationship with each other. The Etz Chaim also contain the spiritual qualities that are in the human condition. So these are positive qualities, but of course the Amalek is always there. There's an influencing factor that takes us away from our fundamentals and God's. This is a ceremonial meal, and it consists of eating various fruits and nuts. And each one is symbolic of a human trait based on having a hard shell or no shell, a soft inner or no inner. And that's always fun to play with for characteristics of humans. The actual fruit, of course, is the final product of an older generation, which bears within it the seed of the next generation. Now, a seed was planted metaphorically upon entering the sea. The seed deep in the ground, as Tu B'Shvat happens, awakens. The seed was dormant during our time of slavery, during that winter of time. Now that the thawing can begin, the seeds can begin to grow. So the mystics felt that this ritual was a sort of intervention, since it evokes the themes of restoring a cosmic balance, as it were, a balance that will make its way into us as we come into our freedom more. Anything from that? Questions, comments, arguments, interests? Okay. So we have a quote, and we'll end with this quote. Ha'adam etz hasad, man is a tree of the field. That is actually in Deuteronomy, but it is used in describing the Tu B'Shvat Seder quite a bit. So wondering, man is a tree of the field. Anybody have any ideas about why that statement's been looked at so much, and a holiday was even based around it? So one thought is that the trees and the roots are actually interconnected if I understand that scientifically correct manner, I know that some are, I know the root systems communicate with each other to some degree. And so all of the plants, all of the trees rely on each other in a field for their very existence. Just as humans all rely on each other in many ways for our existence. We are one among many. I'd like to say people are trees in the field, but it just doesn't flow as easily as man. But and so we are one among many. We are one of the whole. And there's also a lot of comparison with individual trees as having the roots are fundamentals, the bones of Joseph, then the trunk as being more a part of our foundation, the branches continually growing and reappearing, falling off. So any questions or comments about the tree? No. Okay. So as we grow from our seeds of knowledge and debates and arguments, and may we come into our own being more and have a lovely Tu B'Shvat acknowledgement of all of those aspects of us that we discussed. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Zoe.
Yasher Koach.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Nice turnout.
Thank you all for being here very much.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom,
Shalom.
everyone.
Shalom.
Thank
Shabbat
you all
shalom.
for being here.
Enjoy
Can I
it.
ask one question before you leave?
If it's of me, I can stay as long as you want.
Oh, okay. I'm wondering, can you put that poem in the chat so we can save it?
Absolutely. You know what? I don't know if I can find it quick enough for the chat.
Oh, or else we can write you afterwards or something.
That would be great. How about if I put in the chat my email information?
That'd be wonderful.
And I am very happy to discuss anything. So
Thank you.
I always welcome communications.
Yeah, and I'm happy to send it out if you'd like me to send it to everybody, whatever works.
Either way for me.
Thank you.
Okay. Toda rabah. Take care.
Thank you again.
Thank you.